Welcome in. I'm so glad you took the time out to attend this. Today, I wanted to talk about expansion, so scaling, but not just opening more houses. I want to talk about expanding to where it's not going to add more to your plate as far as the work that you have to do, because I'm very big on efficiencies and procedures and things like that with my military background. I'm used to procedures. I love procedures, standard operating procedures. So I'm Katrina. I have 3 unlicensed co-living homes in San Antonio, Texas, but I actually live in Los Angeles, California. So I teach people how they can open their own profitable co-living or group homes and how to run them from afar. But
Okay.
most of my coaching clients actually live in the same city as their home, but they choose me as their coach because they want to focus on working on the business and not in the business.
Got
And they don't want their co-living business to consume their entire life.
Makes
Now,
sense.
yes, so I have a lot of people who have day jobs who decide to come to me for coaching because they need to keep their day job for now, and eventually they'll be able to fire their day job, but for now they need to keep it, and so they don't want this business to consume their entire life.
Yes.
Now, when people think about expansion, they think about getting another property or getting another property in another city or another state. But if your first house only works because you are personally answering every text message or solving every maintenance issue or collecting rent, handling resident drama, and remembering everything in your head, then another house is not really going to be expansion for you. It's just going to be more work for you.
I see.
So the goal is to build a multi-city or multi-home operating system. We want a business that can grow without you becoming the bottleneck. And that's what you don't want to do. And that's what a lot of managers mess up anyway. In any kind of industry, managers become the bottleneck. They're like, I have to see everything. I have to do everything. And that's not what we want. We don't want it to become the bottleneck in our business. So today I'm going to show you the categories of systems that you need before you expand your business, before you start scaling from one house to multiple houses. I'm not going to give you every template or every detailed workflow because that's what we build inside my coaching program. But you will leave knowing what needs to be in place before you take on another house or another market. So one house can run on hustle mode. So you can't have one house where you're answering everything. You're handling everything through text message. You're doing things at the last minute and you're being the person that everybody calls. One house can run like that. And a lot of people do run one house just like that, where they're just in reaction mode all the time and hustle mode and all the time. But multiple homes cannot run that way without burning you out. Multiple homes cannot run with you on hustle mode. So the shortcuts that may work at house number 1 become chaos by the time you get to house number 3. Every weak system gets louder and communication problems get bigger. Rent collection gets messier and maintenance issues fall through the cracks. Nobody knows who owns what. Marketing slows down because you're too busy putting out the fires, the everyday fires that pop up. So the goal is not just to own more properties. The goal is to build a business that does not need you personally involved in every text thread or every maintenance request and every little resident issue that pops up. You want to become the CEO of the business, not the emergency contact for every house. Mhm. So a property is not a business model. Expansion happens when your processes can be duplicated easily. There's a major difference between operating a house and building a business. A house operator usually knows everything personally. They solve the problems as they happen. They rely on their memory, text messages, relationships, and favors. And when they're unavailable, things start to slow down. Whereas an operating system is different. It documents how things happen. It assigns ownership before the problem happens. So that's standard operating procedures. It tracks work in shared tools, and it creates standards that other people can follow. And that's something that I give you in my coaching program, all of my processes, procedures, and standard operating procedures, so that you can take that documentation and hand it off to someone else. You can hand it off to an operator, to the operations manager. And that's what I teach in my coaching program. So that way he or she can follow that and they know exactly what to do, and nobody is reinventing the wheel.
I see.
So that's the difference between a business that depends on you and a business that can grow beyond you. So that's the scaling. And you don't expand just by adding another property. You expand by duplicating a system that already works. A lot of people wait till they're getting another house to start putting systems in place, but you really need to start the way you want to end. Even if you only have one house, you need to have systems that are documented, systems in place, because you have to see the vision. And if you want to have multiple of these homes, you need to act like you're having multiple homes from the jump, from the first house. So that way you can take that process and duplicate it, and you'll know what works and what doesn't.
Okay.
So before you sign another lease, before you buy another property or start looking in a new city, you got to test your current foundation. You got to ask yourself certain things like, can someone else answer routine resident questions without calling on you first? And are rent payments collected through one system, or are people paying through cash, through Zelle, through money order, and random arrangements? You want to make sure that you have one system that you can rely on. And for me, that system is Rent Ready. I use a tenant management system called Rent Ready, and that's how all of my my brain for the business is right there. That's where I'm tracking all of the payments that come in. If something is late, it shows up in Rent Ready. If somebody needs to be charged an extra late fee, it's automatically charged in Rent Ready. So that's the whole brain of the system right there. Also, do you have repeatable move-in processes? Do you have an intake process? Or are you reinventing it every time somebody is approved to move in? And are maintenance issues tracked somewhere outside of text messages? That's another thing that's tracked in Rent Ready is maintenance requests. Maintenance requests can come in directly through Rent Ready, and I get notified on my phone, and so does the operations manager. And then we have a paper trail of what happened with that maintenance request, and we can close it out. And we can even chat with the residents through Rent Ready. And also, can you clearly see profit by house? Not just the money that's coming into the bank account, but what is the profit? We need to know what is the money coming in, and then how much did you spend on all of your expenses? So your administrative costs, you need to have all of those documented so you can actually see what your profit is and what your loss is, not just the money that's coming in. So you can see the big picture. And then one of the biggest questions, could you leave town for a week without everything becoming a crisis? Can you walk away and know peacefully, you can walk away peacefully and know that things are still going to happen and work without you? That's what I wanted when I started my business. So when I started all three of my co-living homes, I was living out in California. My houses were in Texas. In the beginning, I was so nervous and anxious that I was flying out there all the time. Every 3 weeks, I was flying out there. 3 weeks can be a long time that you're leaving your business, but I was doing that from the beginning, and now I can go months without having to physically be at my homes because of the systems that I put into place.
Oh, wow.
And if the answer to any of these questions is no too often, then that means you cannot fully expand. You can expand eventually, but your next move instead of expansion should be strengthening the foundation first. When I think about multi-city co-living business or multi-home co-living business, I think about 4 layers. So the first layer is a centralized CEO system. This is where you control your brand, your standards, your strategy, money, policies, all the technology tools, and the overall resident experience. The second layer is local execution. So some things do require someone physically near the property, and that's why I have an operations manager. For example, doing house tours to show available rooms, or handling move-ins. So when the intake process, I can actually do over the phone or online, but the actual move-in, the move-in day, I would want someone to be there on site. Opening the door for vendors. That's something that a resident in charge can handle, is opening the doors for a maintenance man that comes over, or handling certain emergencies that pop up and doing other walkthroughs with caseworkers and things like that. That is local execution, and that's the second layer. The third layer is documentation. So this includes your standard operating procedures, your house rules, checklists, communication standards, and emergency protocols. The fourth layer is visibility and accountability. You need a way to see what is happening across every house without chasing people down through text messages. You need a way to see everything. So these four layers work together. Without centralized standards, every house starts doing things differently. And without the local execution piece, the remote management becomes wishful thinking. And without documentation, your team depends on memory. So you have to have everything documented. And without the visibility, you don't know that there's a problem until it has become a very expensive problem. Trust me, I know from experience. You have to have visibility on what's going on. And this is another reason why I have my weekly call with my operations manager, just to hear everything that's going on in the house, because something might be going on that he doesn't think is that big a deal, so he's not going to say anything. But if I'm touching base with him every single week and asking him about what's going on at the house, then it's going to come up, and then I can stop that right away and say, oh, you know what, that's going to become a big expensive problem, so let's handle that right now. Okay, remote does not, and this is something that a lot of people come to me and say, I don't want to do remote because that means that nobody's watching the house. No, when I say remote, it does not mean that nobody is local. One mistake I see people make is that they think that remote management means that there's nobody watching the house whatsoever. And that's just not true. That's not true. When I say I have my homes on autopilot and that I'm remote, yes, I'm remote, but that doesn't mean that nobody is there and there's no oversight whatsoever. It would be chaos if we had zero oversight. Remote ownership just means that you, as the owner, are not the person who's doing every physical task. But the physical tasks still need a local person. They still need a local person or some kind of vendor or some kind of system in place to handle the things that you just cannot do remotely, which I talked about earlier.
Okay.
So as the centralized CEO, I should be focused on the brand standards, the financial oversight, my technology and reporting systems, the policies, the resident experience, and my weekly leadership review. So I talk about on my YouTube channel, my weekly CEO hour. So that's the review of the entire business. That's the working on the business, not in the business. And the local execution includes showing the vacancies, so showing the vacant rooms, handling the move-ins, giving vendors access. That's something that the operations manager does not need to do himself. He could have a resident in charge, somebody who lives in the house, who's there all the time. When you have people who have SSI and SSDI, a lot of them are home all the time. So they can open the door for people who need to come into the house. So vendor access, being available for true emergencies, and also completing light inspections, because you do want someone to come over to the house and make sure that everybody's doing their chores, make sure you're not going to have some kind of a bug infestation because people are eating in their rooms and not observing the house rules. So you need someone to come over and make sure that the house is running the way it's supposed to run. So the magic is not trying to do everything remotely. The magic in this is knowing what must be local and what must stay centralized. That's how this works. So you shouldn't have to drive across town or for me, fly across the country to solve problems that a local team member like my operations manager or a process should be able to handle. Now, I've been talking a lot. Do you have any questions so far?
Well, I was going to ask, why do you, I mean, your residents, the people that live there with, in your home, that occupy the home,
Mhm.
I mean, you trust them to let vendors in? They just what? are free to open the door and just anybody walk in? Do you train them? Do you give them? I mean,
No, they're not allowed to open the door to anyone unless I have told them or the operations manager has told them that we are expecting this certain vendor to come over at this certain time. And then they can open the door to that person.
okay.
Yes, but it's in our house rules that they're not allowed to open the door for anyone. They have a code to get, it's a keyless lock. So they have a code to get into the house and they're not allowed to share their code with anyone and they're not allowed to open the door for anyone. But if we have a vendor that's going to come over, so like say we have an electrician who's coming over because something is going wrong with a light switch or whatever, then I send a message through Rent Ready, or my operations manager can send a notification through Rent Ready that says between this hour and this hour, we have this particular vendor who's coming over. Please allow them access to the house.
So does it alert them? Is there an alarm? I mean, is there something that goes
Yes.
off to alert them that,
Yes. So in Rent Ready is an app on their phone. So when they receive a notification through Rent Ready, they receive it via email and like a ping or ding on their phone. It's a notification that
so
pops
you
up.
just make
So
sure
they'll,
I'm sorry, you just
yeah,
make sure that everyone has it on their phone and able to get in and know how to navigate.
yes. So I do have a couple of people who don't have smartphones. They might have a flip phone, but they don't have a smartphone. So they're not going to receive the notification. But the other people in the house will receive the notification and the house members talk. They talk to each other all the time. So they'll say, "Did you see that text from Katrina? It said that we have an electrician coming over at 3."
Okay.
So then everybody will know that someone's coming. And then also, I use the Ring app. So I have Ring cameras. I have cameras in all of the interior of the house, not all of the interior, but all of the common areas. So the interior common areas and the exterior of the house. So I can also see who's coming and going from the house on my phone.
Okay. Okay.
That was a great question. Okay, so you can't manage what you can't see. That's funny you just mentioned that because this is the next slide I was going to talk about. So a growing owner needs a weekly command view. So not a bunch of scattered messages or a feeling that everything is probably okay and not waiting until a resident is angry or a bill is overdue to find out that something is wrong. So every week you should be able to see occupancy, how many beds are filled, which houses have vacancies, and what rooms need attention. And this is part of my weekly meeting that I have with my operations manager. We go over the same topics every time we have our meeting. So I want to know what the occupancy rates are, what beds are full, which houses have vacancies, what rooms need attention, what maintenance issues are going on, and if there are any resident conflicts. I want to know all of those things every week.
So
We should also go ahead.
I'm sorry, is it your operations manager that's updating all of that?
Yes, I can update it as well. We both have access to Rent Ready and we can update everything. But I want to make sure, even though I can see it in Rent Ready, I want to make sure that I'm not missing anything. Because if someone moved out last week and for some reason my operations manager did not update Rent Ready, then I wouldn't know that it's not up to date. So I want to go over everything with him. I want to say, I see that room number 2 at this location is vacant. Is that still the case? Or I see that this guy is here, but I saw a text earlier last week that said he was going to move out. Did he move out? Let's update Rent Ready together.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And so you're welcome. And you should also be able to see all of the payments. So who paid, who's late, and I can see all of this on Rent Ready. But here's an example. If someone moved out, Rent Ready is going to show that this payment is late. Even though they have left, it's still going to have that payment in there unless you have cleared that person from that room and unlink them from that bed. So it's important that we go over who's paid, who's late, who made a promise to pay. That's another thing that when a lot of times with this type of home, this type of business, depending on the demographics that you house, there's a lot of favors and I'm going to pay you on Friday if that's okay, because this happened and that happened. And it's up to you what you're going to accept. And it's up to you, how flexible you're going to be. So for me, in the beginning, I was too nice. And so it would, and by the way, you pay for mentorship or you pay for mistakes. So that's why I say pay for a mentor, because when you pay for a mentor, you can learn from their mistakes. And I've made all of them. So you can learn from me. Say somebody was supposed to pay their rent on Wednesday and they say, I'm going to pay you on Saturday. I'm going to be able to pay you on Saturday. So immediately I should have issued the 3-day notice to pay or vacate. So that way I start the paper trail. But instead, I'm like, oh, okay, he's going to pay me on Saturday. And the Saturday comes, no, I need a couple more days. So now it's pushing, it's kicking the can down the road, kicking the can down the road. So what you need to do is just stick to your procedures. That's why I'm very into sticking to your procedures. Don't reinvent the wheel ever. And then if the person does pay, cool. If not, then you can move on to the eviction process. You also want to know all about the house maintenance. So what issues are open and outstanding? How long have they been open? What's the estimated cost to get this fixed? Do we have someone available, a vendor available, or somebody that we've used before who can fix this problem? And is something becoming a bigger problem because it hasn't been addressed properly? So you want to know all about the home maintenance issues. Now, if you're renting a house from someone to do this business, which you can do, you can rent a house to do this. Things that are big ticket, so over $500, generally the owner of the house would be responsible for those things. But if it's under 500 or less, then usually the operator who's working out of that house would pay for those issues. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is that you need to have some like a petty cash balance available. That's what I like to have, a petty cash balance available for small things that need to be repaired. You should also be able to see in your command view your upcoming move-ins. And that's something else that you can see in Rent Ready. So if you have someone who, let's say it's mid-month and you have someone who's planning on moving in on the 1st, they've already filled out their intake, they're already approved, you've run a background check on them if that's something that you do in your business, and they've paid a deposit to hold that bed. I actually don't like to call it deposit because people think they're going to get it back. So I like to call it a non-refundable processing fee. So if they've paid a non-refundable processing fee, then you've collected that, and then you can go ahead and enter them into the tenant management system, Rent Ready, and it shows that they are pending move-in. So they're going to move in. So you want to be able to see upcoming move-ins, because then that goes into your bank account. So you're going to see what money is going to be coming in. You also want to see any resident complaints or risks and cash flow by property. So that's something you want to see as well. So your dashboard doesn't have to be anything fancy, but it needs to be where you can see problems early enough to take the lead on those. And that's why I really like Rent Ready as well. Because when you can see the business clearly, then you can make smart decisions before small issues become emergencies. Mm-hmm. So I want to save you from a few expensive mistakes. The first one is opening house number 2 before house number 1 is stable. If the first house has vacancies or late rents or constant resident issues or no systems, then another house is not going to fix that. The second mistake is choosing a city just because the rent looks cheap, like to rent a house looks cheap. Because cheap rent doesn't automatically mean it's going to be good demand or strong referral relationships or reliable vendors or a profitable market. Another major mistake is hiring local help without clear expectations, because a local person without a role and a communication rhythm can create more confusion and not less. So everything needs to be very clear on what their duties are. And so that's something I give my coaching clients as well, is the duties of this operations manager and also a sample contract. It's an independent contractor. That's the way I teach it. So it's a 1099 independent contractor, and I give you the exact contract that I use. And you don't want to run operations through personal text messages, because just text messages is not really a system. You need to have a system for everything. And then also don't assume that a full house is automatically profitable, because you need to know your expenses. You got to know your expenses, collections, how late people are paying their rent, maintenance costs, any staffing costs. Now, for me, my operations manager makes a percentage of what each person pays, and he only gets paid based on the beds that are full. So that's why that's not really it's not an issue for me, because he is incentivized to keep my beds full because he gets paid a certain amount of money per filled bed per month. And then you also want to know the actual profit by property. So that's important too. Expansion should make the business bigger. It shouldn't make the owner more overwhelmed and more trapped in their business. So it should just make the business bigger and more profitable. All right. So if expansion is your goal, here's the high level focus that I would have over the next 90 days. Month one is to stabilize. You want to focus on occupancy, rent collections, recurring problems, resident issues, and anything that's currently causing you to be reactive. Month two is systemize. So we're going to start organizing your workflows and clarifying responsibilities. We're going to build up your vendor list. You always have a go-to list of who you're going to call for whatever issue that pops up, and moving important communication out of random text threads and into a system. Month three is preparing to replicate. This is where you can evaluate the next market and think about who your local support is going to be in that market, and review your financial readiness and begin creating a realistic launch plan. So don't rush into the next property just because you're excited about growth. You want to build up the machine that can actually carry the next property before you get the next property. Because the strongest expansion is not fast expansion, it's repeatable expansion. And I can tell you from my experience. So the first house that I opened was 5-bedroom, 5-bath, and 3 of the rooms were double size. So I put multiple beds, like 4 beds in those rooms. So it was 15 beds. It was 15 beds. And 15, I charged $560 a month per bed. So that was $8,400 when I filled those beds, $8,400 a month in gross rents. And then I was pocketing about my profit. It was $5,400. So I was really excited. And I'm like, oh my gosh, once I got my anxiety down, so I was looking at the cameras all the time, flying out all the time, I was like, oh, I'm going to get the second house. So I got the second house. Now, once I was under contract on that second house, that's when I was like, oh, wow, I really should have documented more things, and I need to hire some help. So then I was scrambling to document everything and hiring help so that I could pass it on to this person, to this operations manager. You want to start off the way you want to end. You don't want to be scrambling like I was, like, oh, and how do I do the intake process? Let me write it down. How do I do this? Let me write that down. You need to just start off with your documentation so that everything is a well-oiled machine, and you can hand that off to an operations manager.
So is that how you create your SOPs? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's exactly how I created my SOPs. Is that I went out there and I sat with him for about a week, and just everything that I did to manage my house, I documented it during that time. Like, he would say, okay, how do you handle intake? How do you handle screening somebody to see if they can move in? And when they do get here, what do you give them? All these things, I just talked it out with him and wrote it down. This was before I even learned about AI and where I could just dictate into my phone or whatever. I didn't do that. I would write it out and then I would type it up. And that's how I did my SOPs.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So today, this is conclusion. Today, I gave you the categories of what a multi-home or multi-city operating system needs. But knowing the categories and actually building the system are 2 different things. So inside my coaching program, we work on the implementation around your actual business. So that includes your expansion strategy, market selection, property acquisition support, and the detailed standard operating procedures and templates, your team structure. Like, for example, if you're going to have an operations manager, how many homes do you expect him to handle? Do you expect him to handle 3 homes, 5 homes? And then when are you going to hire another operations manager? And what's going to be your process to do that in the training, accountability, Marketing systems. That's another thing I'm really big on in my coaching program is marketing. And marketing is ongoing all the time, but you don't have to be doing it all the time. You can batch that work and then use technology tools to have your marketing go out throughout the entire year. We batch work and do a year of emails in one day in my coaching program. Referral systems and operational troubleshooting, because your business is not exactly like someone else's business. Your market, your finances, current occupancy, your staffing situation, and your growth goals, they all matter. So that's why it's important to have a coach who can work with you one-on-one. So if you're serious about expanding and you don't want to learn every lesson the hard way, like I did, then that's what the coaching is for. So if you would like to book a call with me, just let me know and we can determine whether my coaching program is the right fit for where you are right now. And for
Okay.
questions today, I'm happy to answer at the high level, but for customized implementation, like exactly what you should do next in your market, that's what we handle inside the coaching program. So thank you so much for attending today. I appreciate your time.